The widow inherits land in the middle of nowhere. But what was inside the cave changes everything forever. Sarah Mitchell held her 7-month-old baby tightly against her chest as she surveyed the arid expanse of land that now belonged to her. The lawyer's words still echoed in her mind like a cruel echo of the fate life had dealt her. The land inherited from her late husband was her only hope of paying off the debts he had left behind, but that vast rocky stretch seemed more like a bitter joke than a solution. With only a worn leather suitcase and the few savings she had left, she had traveled 3 days by bus from New York City to that forgotten corner of the Texas Hill Country. The scorching midday sun beat down mercilessly, and little Ethan fussed restlessly in her arms. Sarah adjusted the black scarf covering her brown hair, shielding herself from the dust the wind carried among the rocks scattered across the property. Each step she took raised small clouds of dry earth, and she felt her throat scratch with the dryness of the air. She had walked for almost an hour since the truck driver had dropped her off on the dirt road, following the directions scribbled on a crumpled piece of paper. The land stretched for acres, dotted with enormous rocks that rose like silent sentinels. The vegetation was sparse, just a few hardy plants insisting on surviving in that seemingly infertile soil. Ethan began to cry louder, and Sarah felt despair tighten her chest. How could she sell this desolation? Who would buy a piece of land in the middle of nowhere, where not even a house stood? The lawyer had mentioned the land had potential, but looking around she couldn't imagine what kind of potential could exist there. She searched for some shade where she could rest and nurse Ethan. Among the larger rocks, she noticed a formation that created a kind of natural shelter. She headed there, relieved to find a respite from the relentless heat. That's when she heard something that made her stop abruptly. Human voices echoed from somewhere nearby, but she saw no one. The sound seemed to come from beneath the earth, as if the rocks themselves were talking. Sarah stood still, straining her ears. It wasn't her imagination. There were definitely people talking, and the voices came from a specific direction. Following the sound, she discovered an opening among the stones she hadn't noticed before. It was a natural entrance, almost hidden by the arrangement of the rocks. The voices grew clearer as she approached. There were at least 3 different people talking, including what sounded like a child's voice. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Sarah hesitated for a moment. Who were these people and what were they doing on her property? Curiosity overcame fear, and she carefully approached the cave entrance. The opening was wide enough for a person to pass through, and a soft light came from inside, indicating there was another exit or that someone had a flashlight in there. "Is someone there?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. The voices stopped immediately, as if everyone had held their breath. Sarah heard hurried whispers and movement inside the cave. After a few seconds, that felt like an eternity. A man's voice replied, "Who's there? What do you want?" "I'm Sarah Mitchell," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "This is my property. I inherited this land recently." More whispers, now more agitated. Ethan had stopped crying and looked curiously at the dark opening. Sarah felt a mix of nervousness and indignation. If there were people trespassing on her land, she needed to know what was happening. "Say, please, come out of there," she said, raising her voice slightly. "You are trespassing on private property." The answer came in the form of a middle-aged woman who slowly emerged from the cave. She had graying hair tied in a messy bun and wore simple but clean clothes. Her eyes revealed a mixture of embarrassment and despair. "I'm sorry, ma'am," said the woman, clasping her hands in a plea. "We didn't know anyone would come. Your late husband. He allowed us to stay here." Sarah felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Her husband, David, knew these people. How was that possible if he had never mentioned owning land, much less that people were living on it? "My husband allowed it?" she asked, her voice laden with confusion. "What do you mean? He never told me anything about this land or about you." The woman lowered her eyes, clearly uncomfortable. "Perhaps he didn't want to worry you with our troubles. We are just people who needed a temporary place to stay." Other figures began to emerge from the cave. A man of about 40, thin with a sparse beard, appeared first. Behind him, 2 children, a boy and a girl, who couldn't have been more than 10 years old, peered out curiously. A second, younger woman holding a baby who seemed about the same age as Ethan also showed herself. "How many people are living here?" asked Sarah, feeling completely lost. "We are 3 families," answered the man in a deep but respectful voice. "I am William Carter. This is my wife Margaret." He pointed to the woman with graying hair. "Those are our grandchildren, Benjamin and Emily. And this is Jennifer," he indicated the younger woman, "with her son Joshua." Sarah looked at each of them, trying to process the information. Did these people know David? How long had they been living on her property? And more importantly, what was she supposed to do now? "How long have you been here?" she asked. "Almost 6 months," replied William, nervously fidgeting with the hat he held in his hands. "We arrived at the beginning of winter. Your husband was very kind to us when we explained our situation." What situation? Sarah couldn't hide her growing irritation. How had David hidden this from her? They had been married for 8 years, and she thought there were no secrets between them. Jennifer stepped forward, adjusting the baby in her arms. "Mom, we lost our homes in the flood that hit the region last year. We had nowhere to go, and your husband offered this place as temporary shelter." The flood. Sarah vaguely remembered David commenting on a natural disaster that had affected some towns in the hill country, but he had never mentioned knowing victims personally, much less that he had offered direct help. Ethan began to fuss again, signaling he was hungry. Sarah looked around, feeling torn between the need to care for her son and the unexpected situation unfolding before her. The heat remained intense and she felt sweat trickling down her back. "Look," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I don't know what my husband promised you, but the situation has changed. I need to sell this land as soon as possible. I have debts to pay and a son to raise." The silence that followed was heavy. The children clung to their grandmother's skirts, and Jennifer instinctively held her baby closer. William exchanged a worried look with his wife. "Mrs. Mitchell," said Margaret, her voice full of pleading, "we understand your situation, but we have nowhere to go. I watch the children while William and Jennifer look for work in the neighboring town. If you could give us just a few weeks, perhaps we could save enough money to rent a small place." "A few weeks?" Sarah felt the pressure mounting. "I can't wait a few weeks. My husband's debts are due. If I can't sell soon, I might lose everything." At that moment, the wind shifted direction and brought with it the distant sound of thunder. Sarah looked at the horizon and saw dark clouds gathering quickly. The weather in the hill country was unpredictable, and a storm could be violent. "It's going to rain," William observed, following her gaze. "And it's going to be heavy. You shouldn't be on the road when it starts." As if to confirm his words, another thunderclap echoed, closer this time. Ethan began to cry again, frightened by the sound. Sarah looked at her lone suitcase in the middle of the lot and then at the cave entrance. "There's nowhere else to take shelter here," Jennifer said kindly. "The cave is dry and safe, at least until the storm passes." Sarah hesitated. The last thing she wanted was to accept shelter from the very people she was trying to evict. But Ethan was getting more and more upset, and the prospect of being out in the open during a storm with a baby was terrifying. "Just until the rain stops," she finally said. "Then we'll talk about you finding another place." William ran to get her suitcase as the first drops began to fall. Sarah followed Margaret into the cave, carrying Ethan. The interior completely surprised her. The cave was much more spacious than she had imagined. A natural opening in the ceiling allowed light in during the day, and they had ingeniously organized the space. There was an area outlined with stones where they made a fire, some makeshift mattresses made of dry leaves and fabrics, and even a kind of rudimentary kitchen built on a rocky ledge. "You organized all this?" Sarah asked, impressed despite herself. "William is very handy," Margaret explained with a proud smile. "He worked in construction for years before the flood. He knew how to make this place livable." The children, Benjamin and Emily, watched Sarah with curiosity, mixed with shyness. Jennifer prepared a corner with clean fabrics where Sarah could breastfeed Ethan in privacy. The unexpected kindness of these people left her even more confused about the situation. The rain began in full force, and the noise echoed magnificently through the cave. Ethan, finally fed and comfortable, fell asleep in his mother's arms. Sarah watched the families interact and noticed the care and affection they had for each other. "Are you all related?" she asked. "No," Jennifer replied, gently rocking her own baby. "We met at the temporary shelter the city set up after the flood. We ended up becoming a family out of necessity." "And the children's father?" Sarah asked, looking at Benjamin and Emily. Margaret sighed deeply. "They're orphans. Their parents couldn't escape when the water rose too fast. William and I decided to take care of them because they had no one else." Sarah felt a tightness in her heart. These people had lost everything and yet found the strength to care for orphaned children. She looked at Ethan sleeping peacefully and tried to imagine what it would be like to raise a child in such precarious conditions. "And you, Jennifer, your baby's father?" The younger woman lowered her eyes. "He left me when he found out about the pregnancy. Said he couldn't afford to support a family in a desperate situation like ours." The storm continued outside, and Sarah realized she would be stuck there for a few hours. Gradually, the stories of these people began to unfold before her. William had lost not only his home, but also the small carpentry business he had spent years building. Margaret had been an elementary school teacher until the town school was destroyed. Jennifer worked at a small store that was also swept away by the flood. "How do you survive out here?" asked Sarah. "There's nothing for miles. How do you get food, water?" "There's a natural spring in the deepest part of the cave," explained William. "The water is clean and has never run dry, not even during the worst drought. As for food, Jennifer and I walk into town twice a week. I do small carpentry jobs and she helps out in people's homes." "It's a 3-hour walk," added Jennifer, "but we manage to earn enough to buy the basics." Sarah fell silent for a moment, absorbing this information. These people's determination and resilience were impressive, but her own situation remained desperate. She needed to sell the land, and the presence of squatters would complicate any negotiation. "You understand I need to sort out my financial situation, don't you?" she said gently. "It's not that I don't have compassion for you, but I have my own son to think of." "Of course we understand," replied William. "No one expected you to have to deal with our presence here. Your husband told us he had spoken with you about our situation." Sarah stopped rocking Ethan. "What do you mean?" "David said he had spoken to me about you." The 3 adults exchanged uncomfortable glances. Margaret was the one who finally answered, "Yes, ma'am. The last time he was here, about a month ago, he said you were aware of our situation and agreed we could stay until we found a permanent place." Sarah felt the world spin. David had been on this land a month before he died? That was impossible. A month before his passing, he was working normally in New York City, coming home every day at the usual time. When would he have had time to travel out here? "Are you sure it was a month ago?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Absolutely," confirmed Jennifer. "He brought supplies and some blankets. He also left some money for emergencies. Money Sarah didn't know existed. Supplies and blankets she didn't know he had bought. A trip he had never mentioned. How many other secrets had David kept from her? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out as we're just starting, now continuing. The storm outside seemed to mirror the emotional turmoil Sarah felt. Ethan woke up and began to whimper, but she could barely focus on his basic needs as she processed these revelations. "Did he say anything else?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "About his plans for the land, about me, about anything?" William hesitated before answering. "He seemed worried, Mom. Said he was trying to sort out some financial troubles, but that he didn't want to worry you while you were pregnant and then with the newborn baby." "What kind of financial troubles?" "He didn't go into details," replied Margaret. "But he mentioned he'd made some choices that might not have been the wisest from an economic standpoint, though they were the right ones from a human one." Sarah felt tears burning her eyes. Had David hidden problems from her to protect her, or had he gotten into situations he couldn't explain? The image of the husband she thought she knew was shattering before her eyes. Jennifer's baby started to cry, and soon Ethan answered with his own wails. The sound echoed through the cave, creating a melancholy symphony that seemed to reflect the emotional state of everyone present. "Mrs. Mitchell," said Margaret softly, stepping closer, "I know this must be very confusing for you. Perhaps we should let you rest. The children and I can stay in the deeper part of the cave to give you privacy." "No," said Sarah quickly, surprised by her own answer. "No, please. I need to understand what's happening. You knew my husband better than I realized. Perhaps you can help me understand things he never told me." William sat on a smooth rock, removing his hat and running his hand through his thinning hair. "Your husband was a good man, Mrs. Mitchell. That I can say for sure. The first time he met us, he was walking the property when he found us here. He could have called the police, had us removed immediately. Instead, he asked our story and offered help." "First time? How many times was he here?" 3 or 4 times over the months," answered Jennifer. "He always brought something useful, food, medicine, tools. Once he brought books for the children." Sarah looked at Benjamin and Emily, who were now playing quietly in a corner with some objects that appeared to be makeshift toys. The idea of David buying books for unknown children moved and confused her at the same time. "Did he talk about me? About his life at home?" "He did," said Margaret with a gentle smile, "always with so much love. He said he had the strongest, smartest woman in the world, and that he was eager to see what kind of person the baby would become." The tears Sarah had been holding back finally escaped. Knowing David spoke of her fondly to these people brought both comfort and more confusion about why he had kept everything a secret. The rain began to ease gradually, but dark clouds still dominated the sky. Sarah realized that even when the storm passed completely, it would be too late to travel safely back to the city with Ethan. "Where did you expect me to stay tonight?" she asked. "There's no hotel or inn for miles." "Honestly, we didn't know you were coming," admitted William. "The lawyer who came a few weeks ago said the property was in probate, but he didn't mention you planned to visit it personally." "What lawyer?" Sarah straightened her back, alert. "A man in a grey suit, driving a black car. Said he represented the interests of the Mitchell family and wanted to appraise the land." Sarah didn't know any lawyer besides the one handling the probate, and he definitely hadn't mentioned any visit to the property. Something was very wrong. "Do you remember this man's name?" "He introduced himself as Dr. Henderson," said Jennifer. "He asked many questions about the land, about what was here, if we knew the history of the property." "What kind of questions?" William and Margaret exchanged looks again. "He asked about the spring, about whether there were other natural resources here, if we knew why your husband specifically bought this land." Sarah felt a chill down her spine. David had never mentioned buying the land. She had always assumed he inherited it from some distant relative. But if he bought it, why choose such an isolated place? And why would an unknown lawyer be asking specific questions about natural resources? "Did you tell him about the spring?" "We didn't see a problem," answered Margaret defensively. "He said he represented the family, so we assumed he had a right to know." Jennifer was nursing her baby and watching Sarah with growing concern. "Do you think something is wrong?" "I don't know," said Sarah honestly. "But it's clear there are many things about my husband and this land that I didn't know. And now an unknown lawyer shows up asking specific questions. It makes me nervous." Little Emily approached timidly, carrying something in her hands. "Miss," she said with the sweet voice of a child, "the man in the suit forgot this here when he left." She held out a small black notebook to Sarah. The object had gone unnoticed by the adults, but the child's natural curiosity had spotted it. Sarah opened the notebook carefully. The pages were filled with tiny handwriting, numbers, coordinates, and rudimentary sketches of the terrain. One specific note caught her attention. "Spring confirms ideal location. Current owner unaware. Proceed with Plan B if necessary." "My God," whispered Sarah, rereading the phrase several times. "What is it?" asked William, noticing her sudden paleness. "This man, he wasn't a lawyer representing my family. He was investigating the land for other reasons." Sarah showed the note to the other adults. Jennifer paled, and Margaret instinctively pulled the children closer. "What kind of person would do this?" asked Jennifer. "Someone who wants something that exists here," replied Sarah, her mind working quickly. And whatever it is, they believe I don't know of its existence." William stood up and began pacing the cave, clearly agitated. "Your husband mentioned once that he had chosen this land for a specific reason, but never explained what." "When did he say that?" "On his last visit. He was looking at the spring and said he had made the right choice buying this property, even though it cost more than he could afford at the time. More pieces of the puzzle that Sarah couldn't understand. David had spent money they didn't have on a seemingly worthless property, but for a specific reason he kept secret. And now unknown people were interested in the same land. The rain had stopped completely, but the sky was still cloudy. Sarah looked out of the cave and saw that it would be night in a few hours. The decision to stay one more night was no longer optional. It was necessary. "Would you accept my company tonight?" she asked. "Early tomorrow I can walk to the road and get a ride back. But now, I think it's best we all stay together." "Of course," said Margaret immediately. "We'll prepare a comfortable place for you and the baby." While they arranged the blankets and prepared a simple meal with the supplies they had, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the notebook and its implications. If her husband had chosen this land for a specific reason, and if unknown people were interested in it, perhaps the property was worth much more than she imagined. But it also meant that she and these families could be in danger. The children, Benjamin and Emily, timidly approached Sarah during dinner preparations. They seemed fascinated by baby Ethan, who had woken up in a good mood and smiled at anyone who came near. "Can I hold him?" asked Emily, carefully extending her little arms. Sarah hesitated for a moment, but something in the girl's sincere expression convinced her. "Yes, but sit down first to be safer." Emily sat on a smooth rock and held out her arms. Sarah placed Ethan carefully in the girl's lap, who held him with a surprising gentleness for someone so young. "He's so small," said Benjamin, watching with interest. "Smaller than Joshua." "Joshua is almost 8 months old," explained Jennifer. "Ethan is younger." Watching the children interact with her son, Sarah felt a wave of confused emotion. On one hand, she was touched by the kindness and care they showed. On the other, the reality of her situation hit her with renewed force. She was alone in the world with a baby, facing debts and mysteries she couldn't comprehend. "Do you miss the life you had before?" she asked, addressing the adults. William stopped stirring the fire and looked at her thoughtfully. "Of course we feel it, but I've learned that crying over what we've lost doesn't bring anything back. Life teaches us to move forward with what we have." "William has always been a philosopher," said Margaret with an affectionate smile. "Even when we lost everything, he found ways to see hope." "And you?" Sarah asked Jennifer. "How do you manage to keep hope in a situation like this?" The younger woman looked at her son Joshua, who was sleeping peacefully on a makeshift bed. "Because of him. I can't give up because he depends on me. And these people," she gestured toward William and Margaret, "have shown me that family isn't just blood. That's who stays by your side when everything falls apart." The simplicity and depth of the answer touched Sarah deeply. She had spent the last few months focused on her own losses and difficulties, but these people had literally lost everything and still found the strength to care for each other. Dinner was simple: rice, beans, and a few eggs that Jennifer had brought from her last trip to town. But the atmosphere was warm, with the children telling funny stories and the adults sharing happier memories from their previous lives. "Margaret was the most beloved teacher in town," William said proudly. "The children fought to be in her class." "And William made the most beautiful furniture in the region," Margaret returned. "I still hope that one day he can restart his carpentry." "What's stopping you from starting over now?" asked Sarah. "Money," William replied simply. "Tools, wood, a place to work. All that costs money we don't have." "And I would need certificates and documents to teach again," added Margaret. "Many were lost in the flood, and the process to get replacements is expensive and slow." Sarah absorbed this information silently. These people had skills and experience, but were trapped in a situation where they couldn't use their talents due to a lack of basic resources. When night fell completely, they arranged the sleeping areas. Sarah stayed in a more secluded corner of the cave with Ethan, while the other families settled into their usual spots. The sound of water running from the spring created a soft melody that echoed gently through the cave. But Sarah couldn't sleep. Her mind worked intensely, processing everything that had happened that day. The revelations about David, the mysterious lawyer, the notebook with suspicious notes, and now these people who had become an unlikely family. Around midnight, she heard soft footsteps approaching. It was Jennifer carrying Joshua, who had woken up crying. "Sorry," she whispered. "He's restless tonight. I don't want to wake the children." "It's okay," Sarah replied quietly. "Ethan is restless too. Maybe it's the change of environment." The two women sat together in a more secluded area, nursing their babies in the dim light. The silent intimacy of the moment created an unexpected connection between them. "Can I ask a personal question?" Jennifer said after a few minutes. "Of course. Did you know you were pregnant when your husband left?" Sarah felt her throat tighten. "Yes, Ethan was 3 months along. David was so excited to meet his son. He made plans constantly, talked about teaching the boy to play football, about taking him fishing. It must be very hard to raise a child alone." "It is," Sarah admitted, "especially when you discover you didn't know your husband as well as you thought. Today was the first time I heard about this land, about you, about anything related to this part of his life." Jennifer rocked Joshua gently. "Perhaps he wanted to protect you from the worries. Men sometimes do that, thinking they're being kind by hiding problems. Or perhaps he was involved in something he couldn't explain. Do you believe your husband was mixed up in something wrong?" Sarah Mitchell thought carefully before answering. "I don't know what to believe anymore. The man I knew was honest, hard-working, dedicated to his family, but the man who secretly bought land in the middle of nowhere, who had relationships with people I didn't know, who apparently had debts I didn't know existed, that man is a stranger to me." "Perhaps they were both the same man," Jennifer suggested gently. "Perhaps he was honest and dedicated, but also trying to solve problems he didn't want to share with you." "Do you really believe that?" "I do, because I saw how he spoke about you. No one can fake that kind of love. And I saw how he treated us too. There's no malice in a person who dedicates time and resources to help strangers." The conversation was interrupted by a strange sound coming from outside the cave. Both women tensed, listening intently. It was the sound of vehicles approaching, which was very unusual in that isolated location. "Who could be coming here at this hour?" whispered Jennifer. Sarah felt a chill. "I don't know, but it can't be good." The sound of engines grew clearer, and then they heard gates banging and male voices talking outside. The other people in the cave began to wake up, alert to the potential danger. William Carter silently approached the cave entrance and peered out. He returned with a worried expression. "There are 3 men with flashlights," he whispered. "They're examining the land, looking for something." "The fake lawyer?" asked Sarah. "I can't see well in the dark, but I don't think it's him. These men seem different." Margaret had woken the children and was keeping them quiet with gestures, while everyone paid attention to the sounds from outside. The men were talking, but they couldn't make out the words. Suddenly, a bright light illuminated the cave entrance. Everyone held their breath. "Someone's in there," said a gruff male voice. "I saw movement." "Mr. Mitchell," shouted another man. "If you're in there, we just want to talk." Sarah felt her blood run cold. How did they know her name, and more importantly, what did they want? William gestured for everyone to move away from the entrance and hide in the deepest part of the cave. Silently, the families moved with the practice of those who had learned to be discreet. "We know you're in there, Mrs. Mitchell," the voice continued. "We found your suitcase. We don't want to cause any trouble. We just want to talk about the property you inherited." Sarah exchanged desperate looks with the others. How did these men know about the inheritance, and what had happened to her suitcase? "Let's go in," said a third voice. "If she doesn't want to be civil, we'll have to look for her." The sound of heavy footsteps approaching the cave entrance made everyone shrink further into the shadows. The children were trembling with fear, and even the babies seemed to sense the tension in the air. A bright light swept across the inside of the cave. Sarah hugged Ethan against her chest, trying to make herself invisible behind the larger rocks. For a terrifying moment, the light passed very close to where they were hiding. "The cave is bigger than it looks," said one of the men, "and there are signs that people live here. Look for her, she can't have gone far with a baby. Sarah closed her eyes and prayed silently that Ethan wouldn't start to cry. The sound of footsteps echoed through the cave as the men systematically explored every corner. It was then that little Emily, scared and confused, stumbled on a loose stone. The noise echoed through the cave like a gunshot. "Over there!" shouted one of the men. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. The lantern light focused directly on the hidden group. There was nowhere left to hide. Sarah stood up slowly, shielding Ethan, while the others did the same. 3 men with intimidating appearances approached. They wore dark clothes and had expressions that didn't suggest good intentions. The one who seemed to be the leader, a tall man with stubble, addressed Sarah directly. "Mrs. Sarah Mitchell?" "Yes," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "My name is Marcus Carter. I represent some businessmen who have an interest in your property." "At this hour of night? Trespassing on my land and frightening these people?" Marcus shrugged. "We tried to reach you through conventional means, but we discovered you were here. We thought it best to settle the matter quickly." "What matter?" "The sale of the property. We are prepared to make a very generous offer for the land." Sarah looked at the other men, who remained silent but alert. There was something threatening about their presence that made her extremely uncomfortable. "I'm not interested in discussing business this way," she said. "If you want to talk about the property, you can contact my lawyer during business hours." Marcus laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Mrs. Mitchell, I don't think you understand the situation. This land has characteristics that make it very valuable to our clients. It would be better for everyone if we reached a friendly agreement." "What kind of characteristics?" "That's not important right now. What matters is that we can offer much more money than any other possible buyer." William stepped forward courageously. "You can't intimidate this lady. If you want to negotiate, do it properly." One of the other men moved threateningly toward William. "Nobody asked for your opinion, old man." "Leave him alone," Sarah said quickly. "These people have nothing to do with this." "Actually, they do," said Marcus, looking around the cave. "Trespassers can cause legal problems for any sale. It would be better if they left voluntarily." "They are not trespassers." Sarah was surprised by her own firmness. "They have my permission to be here." Marcus looked at her with renewed interest. "Interesting. So you intend to maintain this irregular situation?" "What's irregular is you showing up here in the middle of the night making threats." "We are not making threats, Mrs. Mitchell. We are offering a business opportunity, but like every opportunity, it has an expiration date." Jennifer had positioned herself protectively in front of the children, while Margaret kept Emily and Benjamin behind her. Joshua began to whimper, sensing the tension in the air. "How much are you offering?" asked Sarah, trying to buy time to think. Marcus smiled. $200,000 cash. Sarah tried not to show her surprise. It was much more money than she ever expected to get for a seemingly worthless piece of land. But the fact they were willing to pay so much only confirmed her suspicions that there was something special about the property. "It's a generous offer," she said carefully, "but I need time to consider." "Time is exactly what we don't have," replied Marcus. "Our clients want an answer tonight." "Tonight? That's impossible. I can't make such an important decision without consulting my lawyer, without fully understanding the property's value." "Mrs. Mitchell," Marcus's voice grew colder, "perhaps you don't understand. This is a one-time offer. If you don't accept now, there won't be another opportunity." Sarah felt fear growing in her chest, but also a determined anger. These men were clearly trying to pressure her into a hasty decision, which meant the land was worth far more than they were offering. "And if I refuse?" Marcus exchanged glances with the other men. That would be a shame. Accidents can happen in isolated places like this, especially to people who shouldn't be here. The threat was subtle but clear. Sarah hugged Ethan tighter and looked at the other families. They were in danger because of her inheritance. "Are you threatening me?" "We're warning you about the risks of refusing to cooperate." William, despite his visible fear, took another step forward. "You don't have to accept anything you don't want. We'll help you." "How?" Marcus laughed again. "You're trespassers with no resources. What can you do against—" He stopped talking abruptly, hearing something the others hadn't yet noticed. After a few seconds, Sarah heard it too. It was the sound of another vehicle approaching. The three men became visibly tense. Marcus gestured to his companions, who immediately took defensive positions. "Were you expecting someone else?" he asked suspiciously. "No," Sarah answered honestly. The engine sound grew louder, and then they heard gates banging. New voices echoed from outside, but this time they sounded different, more organized. "Police!" shouted an authoritative voice. "Come out with your hands visible!" Marcus cursed under his breath. Someone must have called the police. But Sarah knew that was impossible. There was no cell signal in that area, and they were hours away from the nearest town. How did the police know there was trouble here? "You inside the cave," shouted the police voice. "Come out immediately with your hands on your heads." Marcus looked furiously at Sarah. "If you turned us in, you'll regret it." "I didn't do anything," she replied. "I don't know how they got here. Everyone out now." The order became more insistent. Marcus hesitated for a moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he signaled to the other men. "This isn't over," he said to Sarah in a low voice. "You can't hide forever." The three men began walking toward the cave exit, but Marcus stopped and turned one last time. $200,000, Mrs. Mitchell. Think carefully before refusing. There won't be a third opportunity." With that, they left the cave. Sarah and the others heard confused voices from outside, orders being given, and then the sound of vehicles driving away quickly. After a few minutes of tense silence, a new voice called from the cave entrance. "Is anyone in there? We're not going to hurt you. We just want to make sure you're safe." The voice sounded different from the men who had just left, kinder and genuinely concerned. Sarah exchanged uncertain looks with William. "Should we answer?" she whispered. "I think so," William whispered back. "If it were a trap, they would have come in already." Sarah walked cautiously toward the entrance, carrying Ethan. "We're here," she said. "Who are you?" A figure appeared at the entrance, a middle-aged man in uniform, with a kind expression. Behind him, Sarah could see other police officers by their patrol cars. "I'm Sergeant Thompson, from the Fredericksburg Police Department. We received a report of suspicious activity on this property." "A report? From whom?" The sergeant hesitated. "It was anonymous. Someone reported that armed men were threatening people in this area." Sarah looked confused. "Armed men?" "They weren't armed, or at least I didn't see any weapons." "Ma'am, are you the owner of this land?" "Yes, I'm Sarah Mitchell. I recently inherited this property." "And these people?" The sergeant looked at the families who were beginning to cautiously emerge from the shadows of the cave. "They are here with my permission." The sergeant nodded understandingly. "Can we speak in private for a few minutes?" Sarah handed Ethan to Margaret, who accepted the baby naturally and followed the officer out of the cave. The night was clear now, and she could see 3 police vehicles parked where the mysterious men's cars had been. "Mrs. Mitchell, I have to be direct with you. This isn't the first time we've received complaints related to this property." "How so?" "A few weeks ago, someone reported criminal activity here. When we came to investigate, we found nothing. But a local attorney contacted us saying he represented your family and that they were worried about trespassers." Sarah felt her heart race. "What attorney?" "Dr. Henderson, if I'm not mistaken. He said the family wanted the property vacated for sale." "Sergeant, that man does not represent my family. I had never heard of him until today, and the people in the cave told me he was here asking suspicious questions." The sergeant looked at her with renewed interest. "Are you sure about that?" "Absolutely. And furthermore, the men who were here earlier offered $200,000 for the land, but in a very threatening way. Something very strange is going on." "200,000? The sergeant seemed surprised. "For this land?" "Exactly. It's a lot of money for a place that seems worthless. It makes me think there's something here that I don't know about." The sergeant looked around, assessing the rocky landscape. "Ma'am, can I give you some advice? Don't make any hasty decisions about this property. If strange people are offering money and making threats, there is definitely something they know that you don't." "What do you think it could be?" It could be anything: mineral resources, strategic location, even something related to the water spring here. Clean water is becoming increasingly valuable. Sarah absorbed this information. The spring. It was the second time someone had mentioned the importance of the water on the property. "Sergeant, can I ask a question? How did you get here so quickly? This region is very isolated." "We got lucky. We were patrolling the main road when we received the call over the radio. But you're right, it would normally take us much longer to get here." Something about the answer didn't sound completely convincing, but Sarah decided not to press. The important thing was that the threatening men were gone, at least for now. "Can the people in the cave continue staying there tonight?" she asked. "We have nowhere else to go." "Of course, but I recommend that tomorrow you find a real lawyer and document everything that happened today, and maybe consider hiring some kind of security if you plan to spend more time here." "Security? Do you think they'll come back?" "People who make threats over $200,000 don't give up easily," said the sergeant seriously. "You need to be careful." After the police left, Sarah returned to the cave with a mixed feeling of relief and apprehension. The immediate danger had passed, but it was clear her inheritance was much more complicated than she had imagined. The families greeted her with concern and questions. Sarah briefly explained her conversation with the sergeant, including the suspicion that the property might have valuable resources. "Maybe the spring is more important than we thought," Jennifer suggested. "Or maybe there are minerals under the land," William added. "These rocks could hide anything." Margaret, who had remained silent during the discussion, finally spoke. "Your husband said something interesting the last time he was here. He said he had discovered this land was special, not just for what was above it, but for what was underneath." Sarah turned quickly to the older woman. "Underneath? What do you mean?" "I'm not exactly sure. He was looking at some papers. They seemed like maps or blueprints. He said he had done the right research before buying. What kind of research? He didn't explain. But he mentioned that the prettiest properties aren't always the most valuable. Sometimes, the land that seems worthless holds the greatest treasures." Sarah felt as if another piece of the puzzle was being revealed, but she still couldn't see the full picture. David had specifically researched this property for reasons she didn't know, and now unknown people wanted to buy it at any cost. "Do you keep these papers he was looking at?" she asked hopefully. "No," Margaret answered sadly. "He took them away, said he needed to keep them in a safe place." "A safe place," Sarah murmured, thinking. "Where would David keep important papers he didn't want me to find?" Jennifer rocked Joshua, who had finally fallen asleep after all the commotion. "Perhaps at his work? Or in a bank account you don't know about?" The mention of unknown bank accounts made Sarah shudder. How many other secrets had David kept? And more importantly, how could she discover the truth about her inheritance without putting herself in danger? The children had finally managed to fall back asleep, exhausted by the night's tension. The adults remained awake, talking in low voices about the events and their possible implications. "Mrs. Mitchell," said William thoughtfully, "perhaps we should explore the cave more tomorrow. If there's something valuable on this land, it might be related to parts of the property we don't know well yet." "Explore how?" she asked. "The spring comes from somewhere deeper in the earth. There might be other chambers, other features we haven't discovered yet." "That could be dangerous," protested Margaret. "What if you get trapped or lost?" "We won't take unnecessary risks," William assured. "But you have the right to fully know your property, especially if other people know things about it that you don't." Sarah considered the proposal. The idea of exploring was frightening, but William was right. If she was going to make decisions about the land's future, she needed to fully understand what she owned. "All right," she said finally, "but only a preliminary exploration and only if you think it's safe." "Of course," agreed William, "and if we find anything interesting, we'll go slow and careful." Jennifer was watching the interaction with growing interest. "Are you starting to think about not selling the property?" The question took Sarah by surprise. She had come with the firm intention of selling everything as quickly as possible, but the day's events had changed her perspective dramatically. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. "Everything I thought I knew about my situation has proven wrong. Perhaps I need to fully understand what I inherited before deciding what to do with it." And us? Asked Margaret gently. If you decide to stay or sell to someone who doesn't want us here. Sarah looked at the three families who had become so real to her in just one day. The idea of evicting them now, knowing their stories and seeing how they cared for each other, was unthinkable. You don't need to worry about that, she said firmly. No matter what I decide about the land, I won't leave you without a place to stay. The relief on the adults' faces was visible, and Sarah realized she had made an important decision without even thinking about it. These people had become her responsibility, and she wasn't going to abandon them. Thank you, said Jennifer, with tears in her eyes. You don't know what this means to us. I think I do, replied Sarah, looking at Ethan sleeping peacefully in Margaret's arms. You showed me today what real family means, and family doesn't abandon family. The words surprised Sarah herself. She had come to this place as a desperate stranger, and now felt connected to these people in a way she couldn't fully explain. Now let's try to get some rest, she said. Tomorrow will be a long day, and we'll need to be prepared for whatever we find. But as she finally settled down to sleep, Sarah knew sleep wouldn't come easily. Her mind was full of questions about David, about the land, about the future that was taking shape in ways she had never imagined. One thing was clear. Her life had changed forever that day. The question now was whether that change would be for better or worse. Dawn arrived with a golden light, filtering through the natural opening in the cave ceiling. Sarah woke to Ethan's soft whimpering, but noticed the others were already moving about quietly, preparing breakfast. Good morning, said Margaret softly, approaching with a cup of hot coffee. We thought it best to let you sleep a little longer after the restless night. Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully and looked around. The children were playing quietly in a corner, while William was organizing some rudimentary tools. Have you decided how we'll explore the cave? She asked. William spent the night thinking about it, replied Jennifer, who was nursing Joshua. He has some ideas about where to start. William approached, holding a flashlight and some ropes. The spring water clearly comes from a specific direction. If we follow the water flow, we might find the main source. And what could that show us? If there are larger cave systems, if there are other mineral resources, or if there's something artificial your husband might have hidden here. The idea of David having physically hidden something in this place hadn't occurred to Sarah before, but considering all the secrets he had kept, it wasn't impossible. How long do you think we'll need? If we're careful, a few hours. But someone needs to stay with the children and someone needs to stand guard in case those men come back. Margaret immediately offered to stay with the children and the babies. I'll stay here. If there's any trouble, I'll hide everyone in the deepest part of the cave and make noise for you to hear. What if they do come back? Asked Sarah nervously. Jennifer can stay at the cave entrance as a lookout, suggested William. From there, she can see the road from a distance and alert us if anyone approaches. The plan seemed reasonable, though Sarah still felt nervous about being separated from Ethan, but her curiosity about the secrets of her inheritance was winning out over fear. All right, she said, but at the first sign of danger, we come back immediately. After a simple breakfast, they organized themselves according to the plan. Sarah kissed Ethan, who was happy in Margaret's arms, and followed William to the deeper part of the cave. The spring water was in an area of the cave she hadn't explored the night before. The water emerged from a fissure in the rock that seemed to continue deeper than the flashlight beams could reach. There, said William, pointing. The water comes from inside the earth. If we can follow the fissure, we might find the main chamber of the spring. Is it safe? William tested the stability of the rocks around the fissure. Seems solid, and the fissure is wide enough for us to pass through. But let's go slowly. They began to move carefully along the narrow rocky channel that followed the water flow. The temperature was noticeably cooler there, and the sound of running water echoed strangely, as if they were approaching a much larger space. After about 15 minutes of cautious walking, the fissure opened into a surprisingly large underground chamber. William directed the flashlight around, revealing an impressive geological formation. My God, whispered Sarah. The cave extended far beyond what they had imagined, with several different springs converging into a kind of underground lake. The rocky walls glistened with moisture, and there were formations that suggested this system had existed for thousands of years. "This is incredible," said William in awe. "It's a complete hydrological system. This water must supply a very large area." "And what does that mean?" "It means your property controls a water source that could be valuable for an entire region, especially with climate change making clean water more scarce." Sarah began to understand why her husband had specifically chosen this land and why unknown people wanted to buy it. Control of a significant water source could be worth much more than $200,000. They continued exploring the underground cave, discovering that it extended in several directions. In some areas, there was evidence that water had flowed through different paths in past eras, creating a complex network of tunnels and chambers. It was in one of these smaller chambers that William made a surprising discovery. "Sarah, come look at this." She approached and saw what had caught his attention. It was clearly an area where someone had been working recently. There were tool marks on the rocks and some objects left behind. "Someone has been digging here," said William, examining the marks. Sarah picked up one of the objects left behind. It was a small pickaxe, still showing signs of recent use. Next to it was a canvas bag with some pieces of rock. "Do you think it was my husband?" she asked. William examined the rock pieces with interest. "These fragments, they seem different from the rest of the rock formation." "How so?" "Look," he showed her a piece of the rock. "This part has a different coloration, almost metallic." Sarah examined the fragment more closely. There really was something different about those rocks, a quality that suggested the presence of minerals. "Do you think there's gold or something like that here?" "Could be. Or it could be another type of valuable mineral, but definitely someone believed there was something here worth digging for." The discovery added a new dimension to the mystery. David hadn't just chosen this land for the water, but had also been digging, searching for minerals. But why do it secretly? They continued exploring for another hour, discovering several other areas where there were signs of recent excavation. In one of them, they found something even more intriguing: a small metal box buried behind some rocks. "William, look at this!" The box was well hidden, but the tool marks around it indicated someone had deliberately buried it. William carefully removed it and handed it to Sarah. "It must be something your husband hid here." Sarah held the box with trembling hands. It was heavy and had a small, simple padlock that seemed more symbolic than functional. With a little effort, William managed to open it with one of the tools. Inside the box were documents carefully wrapped in plastic, some photos, and what appeared to be mineral samples. Sarah removed the documents first. The first paper was a detailed geological survey of the property, dated 6 months before David's death. The survey confirmed the presence of a significant aquifer system and identified moderate mineral potential in several areas of the land. "He had a professional study done," said Sarah, amazed. "This must have cost a lot of money." The second document was even more revealing: a purchase option contract with a mining company offering 300,000 Rs for the property, but with a specific clause that David had rejected. 300,000, exclaimed William, much more than those men offered yesterday. "But look at this clause." Sarah pointed to a section of the contract. "They wanted exclusive water usage rights too." David wrote "never" in large letters over this part. The photos in the box showed different areas of the property, including some they hadn't explored yet. In one of the photos, David was standing next to an older man Sarah didn't recognize, both pointing at rock formations. "Who is this man?" asked William. Sarah turned the photo over, where there was a note in David's handwriting. "Dr. Morrison, geologist, trustworthy." "Apparently my husband found a specialist he trusted," she said. "Someone who helped him understand what he really owned here." The last item in the box was a handwritten letter from David himself, addressed to Sarah. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope. "Sarah, my love, if you are reading this, it means something happened to me before I could explain everything in person. I know you must be confused and perhaps even hurt that I kept secrets, but I hope you understand that everything I did was to protect you and our son. This property is much more valuable than it seems, not just for the money it might be worth, but for what it represents: independence, security for the future, and the possibility of making a difference in other people's lives. The mining company that approached me doesn't just want the minerals, they want to control the water source to speculate and charge exorbitant prices from the local communities. I cannot allow that. If you decide to sell, please contact Dr. Morrison, phone number noted on the back. He can help you find buyers who will respect both the land and the people who depend on it. The families living in the cave are good people who need help. I hope you can find a way to help them while protecting our legacy. I love you more than words can express, and I am deeply sorry I wasn't more open about all of this. Forever yours, David P.S. There are more things hidden on the land. Dr. Morrison has a complete map. Sarah read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. Finally, she had answers to her questions about David. He hadn't hidden secrets out of ill intent, but to protect her from difficult decisions while she was dealing with the pregnancy and then a newborn baby. Your wife chose well, said William kindly, after Sarah showed him the letter. Your husband was a man who thought beyond himself. And now I understand why those men were so desperate to buy the land, said Sarah, wiping away her tears. They know about the water and the minerals, but they don't know that I know. What do you want to do? Sarah looked around the underground cave, thinking about everything she had discovered. Her inheritance wasn't just land and natural resources, but also the responsibility to protect something important for a larger community. First, I need to speak with Dr. Morrison, she said. I want to fully understand what I have here before making any decision. What about the families in the cave? David's letter makes clear what he wanted, and now I want the same thing. They began to make their way back through the cave path, carrying the box and its revealing contents. Sarah felt as if she was finally beginning to understand not only her inheritance, but also the man she had married. When they emerged into the main chamber of the cave, they found Jennifer visibly agitated. "I'm so glad you're back," she said with relief. "There are people approaching on the road. They're not the same men from yesterday, but they don't seem to be here for a friendly visit either." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. How many people? 2 pickup trucks, at least 6 men that I could see. William quickly hid the metal box behind some rocks. "Let's pretend we didn't find anything today. If they ask about explorations, we only know the part of the cave they already saw yesterday." "And what if they brought their own equipment to explore?" asked Sarah nervously. "Then we'll have to stop it somehow." The sound of approaching vehicles grew clearer, and soon they heard voices from outside. This time, the voices seemed more organized, more professional than the threats from the previous night. Margaret appeared from the deep part of the cave, carrying Ethan and guiding the children. "We hid some supplies and personal items," she whispered. "If we need to leave quickly, we're ready." Sarah took Ethan in her arms, feeling more confident with her son close. The morning's discoveries had changed everything. Now she knew she possessed something truly valuable, and she had information that other people didn't know she had. "Mr. Carter," a voice shouted from the cave entrance, "we know you're in there. We want to talk peacefully." Sarah exchanged glances with the others. The voice was different from the men of last night, more polite but equally determined. "We'd better see what they want," said William, "but stay alert for anything suspicious." Sarah moved toward the cave entrance but stopped before showing herself completely. "Who are you, and what do you want?" "My name is Dr. Henderson," the voice replied. "I'm a lawyer, and I represent a company that has a legitimate interest in your property." The fake lawyer the families had mentioned. Sarah felt a wave of anger and determination. "I don't know any Dr. Henderson, and I haven't authorized anyone to represent me," she replied firmly. "I understand the confusion, Mrs. Mitchell. Perhaps we can clear everything up if we speak in person." Sarah stepped out of the cave but kept her distance from the vehicles. There were indeed 6 men, dressed more professionally than the intimidators from the previous night, but their presence still felt threatening. The man who identified himself as Dr. Henderson was middle-aged, bald, wearing an expensive suit that seemed out of place in the arid environment. He held a leather briefcase and smiled in a way meant to be reassuring. "Mrs. Mitchell, first of all, I want to apologize for the unconventional approach last night. Sometimes our business partners use methods we don't approve of." "Business partners?" Sarah kept her voice cold. "You're working with those men who threatened me. Not exactly working together, but we represent similar interests. The difference is we prefer civilized, legal methods." "And what methods are those?" Dr. Henderson opened his briefcase and took out several documents. "I have here a formal purchase offer for your property, $500,000 cash, with all the proper legal proceedings. $500,000, much more than the previous offers, but now Sarah knew the land was worth even more. David's letter mentioned that the original company had offered $300,000 just for the mineral rights. "That's a very generous offer," she said carefully. "But I need to understand why my property has suddenly become so valuable to so many different people. Mrs. Mitchell, I'll be frank with you. This region is being developed for a very important infrastructure project. Your property is in a strategic location for that development." "What kind of project?" Dr. Henderson hesitated for a moment. "A water distribution complex for municipalities in the region. Your land has geological characteristics that make it ideal for this purpose." Sarah now knew he was partially lying. Yes, the water was important, but he was omitting the issue of minerals and probably other aspects of the property's real value. "What if I refuse the offer?" "That would be a shame. Infrastructure projects have legal ways to proceed even without the cooperation of landowners. It would be much more advantageous for you to accept our offer voluntarily." The veiled threat was clear. They had the means to take the property with or without her agreement. Sarah felt fear, but also a growing determination not to be intimidated. "I need time to consider. I understand perfectly, but our deadline is tight. We can give until tomorrow at noon for a final answer." "What if I want to consult my own lawyer?" Dr. Henderson smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, it's your right, but I hope you understand that offers of this magnitude don't remain available indefinitely." At that moment, one of the other men approached Dr. Henderson and whispered something in his ear. The lawyer looked visibly irritated. "Mrs. Mitchell, how long have these people been living on your property?" he asked, gesturing toward the cave. "Why?" "Squatting can significantly complicate any legal transaction. It would be best if the problem were resolved quickly." Sarah felt her anger grow. Now he was threatening not only her, but also the families who depended on that shelter. "These people have my permission to be here. There is nothing irregular about the situation." Verbal permission has no legal value, especially if there are no documents proving adequate living conditions. The threat was clear. They could use local authorities to force the families out, creating more pressure on Sarah. "Dr. Henderson," she said, trying to keep her voice calm, "I will consider your offer, but I will not make any decision under pressure or threats." "These aren't threats, Mrs. Mitchell. They're just legal realities you need to consider." With that, he signaled to the other men, who began returning to the vehicles. "Until tomorrow at noon," he said, getting into his pickup truck. "I hope you make the right decision." After they left, Sarah returned to the cave with her legs trembling. The situation was becoming more complex and dangerous by the hour. "What happened?" asked Jennifer anxiously. Sarah recounted the conversation and the new offer, including the veiled threats against the families. $500,000, whispered Margaret. "That's a lot of money." "But it's not about the money," Sarah said firmly. "It's about not letting these people take something they don't understand and misuse it." William retrieved the metal box from where he had hidden it. "I think we need to contact Dr. Morrison today. If he has more information, we need to know before tomorrow." Sarah agreed. "But how? There's no cell signal here and the nearest town is hours away." "I can go," offered Jennifer. "I make the walk regularly. If I leave now, I can be in town by mid-afternoon and return early tomorrow." "It's too dangerous," protested Margaret. "What if those men intercept you on the road?" "It's a risk we need to take," said Sarah, "but Jennifer shouldn't go alone." William immediately offered to accompany her, but Sarah realized that would leave only her and Margaret to protect the children if something happened. "I'll go too," decided Sarah. "I can take Ethan with me." "And leave me here alone?" protested Margaret. "No," said Sarah, thinking quickly. "We'll all go. We'll close up the cave and go to town. At least tonight we'll be safe, and I can speak with Dr. Morrison in person." "And tomorrow?" asked Jennifer. Are we going back to face these men? Tomorrow we'll return with more information and a proper plan. I won't be forced to make a decision without fully understanding my options. The decision to temporarily evacuate the cave was difficult, but necessary. They spent the next hour organizing their most important belongings and hiding everything they couldn't take. William buried the metal box in a new location, discreetly marking the spot. Sarah kept David's letter and Dr. Morrison's phone in a bag she would carry with her. "What if someone tries to enter the cave while we're away?" asked Emily worriedly. "The cave existed long before we came here," said Margaret gently, "and it will continue to exist long after. The important things are the people, not the place." At 2 in the afternoon, the small group began the walk toward the main road. The children carried small backpacks, the adults took what they could. Sarah carried Ethan in an improvised sling, leaving her hands free to help if needed. The walk was more difficult than Sarah had imagined. The sun was strong, the terrain was uneven, and Ethan grew restless with the constant motion, but the group's determination kept them moving. "How much longer?" asked Benjamin, who was starting to get tired. "About another hour," replied William, who knew the way well. "We'll stop to rest when we reach that big tree up ahead." During the rest, Sarah tried to organize her thoughts about what she would say to Dr. Morrison. She needed information about the property's real value, about the legal options she had, and about how to protect both her inheritance and the people who depended on it. "Do you think we did the right thing by leaving the cave?" she asked. "Yes," Jennifer replied without hesitation. "It was too dangerous to stay. At least now we have time to think and plan. And what if they destroy something while we're away?" "Then we'll rebuild," said William pragmatically. "We've done it before, we can do it again. But this time we'll do it better because we'll have you helping us." His confidence in Sarah's ability to lead and protect the group was surprising and touching. She had arrived at that place just 2 days before as a desperate stranger, and now she was becoming part of a chosen family. When they finally reached the main road, they were lucky to quickly find a truck driver willing to take them to town. Sarah paid for the ride with some of the money she had brought for travel expenses. "Where are we going in town?" asked Jennifer. "First, we'll find a place to stay tonight. Then I'm going to look for Dr. Morrison." The town of Fredericksburg was small but busy, with several simple lodging options. Sarah managed to get rooms in a modest but clean boarding house, where they could stay with the children and the babies. After settling in, Sarah went out in search of Dr. Morrison. The phone number in David's letter led her to a small but well-organized office in the town center. Dr. Morrison was a man of about 60, with graying hair and kind eyes behind thick glasses. When Sarah introduced herself and mentioned David, his expression changed immediately. "My condolences," he said sincerely. "David was an exceptional man. I'm very sorry I couldn't attend the funeral." "Thank you. Dr. Morrison, I found a letter from him saying you could help me understand the property I inherited." Of course. Please have a seat. David told me a lot about you, and about his concerns in protecting you from difficult decisions." Dr. Morrison opened a thick file on his desk. "Your property, Mrs. Mitchell, is far more valuable than most people realize. And not just for its economic value. Did David conduct excavations on the property?" "Under my guidance, yes. We discovered modest but commercially viable mineral deposits, and more importantly, confirmed that the aquifer system is one of the purest and most abundant in the region." "Do the people who want to buy know this?" "Some know. Others suspect. But none of them have the complete report I prepared for David." Dr. Morrison handed a folder to Sarah. "Everything is here. Geological reports, water assessments, economic feasibility analyses, and a list of potential buyers who would respect both the natural resources and the needs of the local community." Sarah leafed through the documents, impressed by the level of detail and professionalism. "What is the property really worth?" "Conservatively, between $2 and $3 million. But that's if it's developed properly and sustainably. 2 to 3 million. Sarah felt as if the world had stopped. The offers she had received were a ridiculous fraction of the real value. And why are these companies offering so little? Because they assume you don't know the true value. They want to buy cheap and then profit from the improper development of the resources. Improper development like what? Dr. Morrison sighed. Mineral extraction without environmental concern, commercialization of water that could affect dependent communities, or worse, sale to even larger interests that would turn the area into an industrial zone. And are there ways to develop the property responsibly? Absolutely. David and I were developing a plan for it before his untimely death. Dr. Morrison showed other documents in the folder. Here is the complete plan. Sustainable development that preserves the environment, generates local jobs, and ensures continued access to water for the rural communities. Is that really possible? Not only possible, but highly profitable. The market for sustainable development is growing rapidly, and your property would be perfect for a pilot project. Sarah absorbed all the information, feeling a mix of excitement and overwhelming responsibility. Her inheritance wasn't just a source of financial security, but an opportunity to do something meaningful. Dr. Morrison, there are people threatening to force me to sell. What can I do legally? What kind of threats? Sarah told him about the visits from the mysterious men and the pressure from the fake Dr. Henderson. This is very serious, said Dr. Morrison. These tactics are illegal and we have to document everything. Are you willing to face a legal battle? If it's necessary to protect what David wanted to protect, yes. Then let's prepare you properly. First, we'll formalize your ownership with all the necessary documents. Second, we'll file a complaint about the intimidation. Third, we'll establish the legal groundwork for sustainable development. How long will this take? The basics can be done in a few days. The full development will take months, but you'll be legally protected very quickly. Sarah felt enormous relief. She had finally found someone who understood the situation and could help her professionally. Dr. Morrison, there are families living on the property. People who lost their homes in a flood. David told me about them. It's part of our development plan to include proper housing for people who need temporary or permanent support. Really? Sarah felt tears of relief in her eyes. Completely serious. Sustainable development includes social responsibility. These families can become part of the solution, not a problem to be solved. When Sarah returned to the boarding house that night, she felt transformed. She had information, she had a plan, and most importantly, she had hope that she could honor David's memory while creating a better future for everyone involved. How did it go? Everyone asked eagerly when she arrived. Sarah sat down in the small room where they were all gathered and told them about her conversation with Dr. Morrison. The reaction was disbelief, followed by growing excitement. $2 million? Whispered Margaret. It's a fortune. But the most important thing, said Sarah, is that there's a way to use this fortune to help people, protect the environment, and still generate sustainable income. And us? Asked Jennifer timidly. How do we fit into these plans? You are an essential part of the plans, Sarah replied with a smile. Dr. Morrison explained that a sustainable community project needs people committed to the place. You've already proven you're committed. William was flipping through some of the documents Dr. Morrison had given to Sarah. Do these plans include carpentry workshops? They do, and schools, and a basic medical clinic, and several other things that can transform not just our property but the entire region. The children, who had been playing quietly, began to pay attention to the conversation when they heard about schools. Will there be a real school? Asked Emily, with teachers and books and everything. There will be a real school, Sarah confirmed, and Mrs. Margaret could be one of the teachers. Me? Margaret grew pale with emotion. It's been so long since I've taught. According to Dr. Morrison, we'll get help to obtain all the necessary certificates and documents. You can go back to doing what you love. Joshua and Ethan, who were sleeping in their mother's laps, seemed oblivious to the excited talk around them. But Sarah thought of the future she could create for them, growing up in a sustainable and supportive community. How long will it take for all this to happen? Asked Jennifer. Dr. Morrison said a few months to establish the legal foundations and start basic construction, a few years to fully develop the project. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we'll go back to our cave tomorrow, but this time with proper legal protection and a real plan for the future. And those men who want to buy the property? Sarah smiled with a determination that surprised her. Tomorrow they'll find out they were trying to intimidate the wrong person. That night Sarah could barely sleep, but not from anxiety like the previous nights. Her mind was full of positive possibilities, plans for the future, and a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. Ethan slept peacefully beside her, unaware of the changes taking shape in their life. Sarah looked at her son and whispered, "Daddy left us much more than land and stones. He left a mission, and we're going to fulfill it." The next morning, the group woke up with renewed energy. They had a plan, they had professional support, and most importantly, they had each other. Dr. Morrison had offered to drive them back to the property in his pickup truck, which would be much more comfortable than the long walk with the children and babies. "Are you all ready to go back?" Sarah asked as they organized their things. "I've never been so ready for anything," William replied with conviction. When they got back to the property, they immediately saw that Dr. Henderson's men had been there during their absence. There were signs that the cave had been explored, and some objects had been moved. "Did they find anything important?" Jennifer asked worriedly. William discreetly checked the spot where he had buried the metal box. "No. They searched, but they didn't find what they were looking for." "Great," said Sarah. "Then we still have the advantage over them. Doctor." Morrison explored the cave and the underground system with professional admiration. "David was right," he said. "This place is perfect for a sustainable development project. It has everything: natural resources, strategic location, and now a committed community." Around 11 in the morning, as expected, the vehicles of the fake Dr. Henderson appeared on the road. This time, there were even more men, and they seemed less interested in polite negotiations. "Remember," Sarah said to everyone, "do not reveal anything about what we've discovered. Let me do the talking." Dr. Morrison stayed discreetly close to his pickup truck, ready to seek help if necessary. The fake Dr. Henderson stepped out of his vehicle with a clearly irritated expression. "Miss Mitchell, I see you've decided to ignore my advice about the people occupying your property." "Dr. Henderson, I see you've decided to ignore my words about not making decisions under pressure. Your deadline is up. I need an answer now." Sarah took a deep breath and straightened up. "My answer is no. I do not accept your offer." Dr. Henderson became visibly furious. "Ms. Mitchell, I don't think you understand the seriousness of the situation. This is your last chance for a friendly solution. And I don't think you understand the seriousness of the situation for you," Sarah replied calmly. "I am rejecting your offer because I know exactly what my property is worth, and I know exactly what my legal rights are." "Your legal rights?" Dr. Henderson laughed sarcastically. "What legal rights?" Dr. Morrison chose that moment to approach. "The legal rights that I represent," he said, handing an envelope to the fake Dr. Henderson. "And who are you?" asked Dr. Henderson suspiciously. "Dr. Jose Morrison, certified geologist and attorney specializing in mineral rights. And these are formal documents filing a complaint for intimidation, trespassing, and attempted fraud against Ms. Mitchell." Dr. Henderson opened the envelope and quickly read the documents. His expression changed to a mix of anger and concern. "This won't stop anything," he said, but his voice had lost its previous confidence. "Actually, it will stop a great deal," replied Dr. Morrison calmly. "Especially when the authorities discover that you are falsely representing yourself as an attorney without a license to practice law in this state." Sarah watched with satisfaction as Dr. Henderson visibly paled. "And when they discover that your company is trying to acquire properties through intimidation and incomplete information," continued Dr. Morrison, "I think they will have many explanations to demand." "You don't know who you're dealing with," Dr. Henderson tried, but now he sounded desperate rather than threatening. "Actually, we know exactly," said Sarah. "We're dealing with people who want to steal something they don't understand and don't deserve." Dr. Henderson looked around, clearly realizing the situation had completely changed. His men seemed uncomfortable, and he no longer had the advantage of pressuring someone uninformed and isolated. "This isn't over," he finally said. "For you it is," replied Dr. Morrison. "I suggest you leave the property immediately and do not return. Any future contact must be made through proper attorneys. following appropriate legal procedures. After a few moments of visible hesitation, Dr. Henderson signaled to his men, and they all returned to the vehicles. As they drove off, kicking up clouds of dust, Sarah felt as if an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "Did they really leave?" asked Jennifer incredulously. "For now," answered Dr. Morrison, "but these legal documents will keep you protected, and when we begin the proper development of the property, it will be much harder for anyone to attempt intimidation." William was smiling broadly. "So we can really stay? We can make the plans we discussed?" "You can, and you will," confirmed Sarah. "Dr. Morrison will help us get everything set up legally, and in a few months, this place will be completely different." The children ran toward the cave, excited to explore their new permanent home. Ethan was awake in Sarah's arms, looking curiously at the surroundings that would become his world in the coming years. "David would be proud," said Dr. Morrison kindly. "I think he knew this would happen," replied Sarah. "Maybe not exactly like this, but he knew I'd find a way to do the right thing." "And now?" asked Margaret. "What do we do first?" Dr. Morrison pulled some documents from his briefcase. "First, we formalize the legal status for all of you. Jennifer, William, Margaret, and the children will have the right to reside permanently on the property as part of the development project." "Reside permanently?" Jennifer began to cry. "We won't ever have to leave again?" "Never again," confirmed Sarah. "This is your home now, officially." "Second," continued Dr. Morrison, "we start the basic improvements: electricity, running water, proper housing structures. Third, we lay the groundwork for the sustainability project: workshops, a school, a basic medical clinic. And last, but certainly not least, we start generating income through the responsible development of natural resources." William was examining the basic architectural plans Dr. Morrison had brought. "These carpentry workshops, can I really be involved in the planning?" "Not just involved," replied Sarah. "You'll be leading it. Who better than someone who already works with wood and understands the community's needs?" "And can I really go back to teaching?" asked Margaret timidly. "You can and you will," said Dr. Morrison. "We'll get all the necessary paperwork, and the school will be one of the first permanent structures we build. And Jennifer," Sarah looked at the younger woman. "What would you like to do?" Jennifer thought for a moment. "I've always had an interest in nursing. Maybe I could help at the medical clinic when it's running." "Perfect," said Dr. Morrison. "We can arrange training and certification. The project will need basic medical staff." Sarah looked around the group, seeing expressions of hope and excitement on everyone's faces. Less than a week ago, she had arrived there as a desperate stranger. Now she was at the center of a chosen family with a promising future. "There's one thing I need to say to all of you," she said. "When I got here, I thought I was coming to solve a problem. In truth, I came to find a solution for a life I didn't know how to live." "What do you mean?" asked William. "I mean, you taught me that family isn't just about blood or marriage. It's about people who care for each other and work together for something better." Margaret stepped closer and hugged Sarah gently. "You taught us something important too." "What's that?" "That miracles sometimes come disguised as problems. When you showed up here, we thought we were going to lose our only home. In truth, we gained something much better." "We gained a real family," added Jennifer. The children, Emily and Benjamin, approached timidly. Emily held Sarah's hand. "Mrs. Mitchell, can I call you Aunt?" Sarah knelt down to be at the girl's level. "You can call me anything that makes you happy." "And can Ethan be my cousin?" Sarah smiled through tears. Ethan would love to have a big cousin to look after him. Dr. Morrison watched the emotional interaction with a smile. "I think David knew exactly what he was doing when he bought this property." "How so?" asked Sarah. "He wasn't just investing in land or natural resources. He was investing in building a community. And communities need people who care about each other." That afternoon, the group worked together to start organizing immediate improvements for the cave. With the legal documents protecting them and a clear plan for the future, there was a positive energy that Sarah hadn't felt in a long time. William began sketching designs for basic furniture that could be built with local materials. Margaret organized a basic schedule to start informal lessons with the children. Jennifer planned a small vegetable garden that could be expanded as the project developed. "Dr. Morrison," asked Sarah, "how long will it really take to see significant changes here? For the basic improvements? A few months. For the complete project? 2 to 3 years. But you'll see steady progress from the very beginning." "And financially? When will I start seeing a return on the investment?" "Interesting that you ask that." Dr. Morrison smiled. "Actually, there are a few aspects of the project that can generate income almost immediately." "How?" "The pure spring water can be bottled and sold locally while we develop the larger infrastructure. And William can start selling handcrafted furniture made with sustainable wood from the region." "Really? We can start earning money that quickly?" "Yes, and it will help fund the larger improvements. It's what we call self-sustaining development." Sarah felt a wave of relief. The idea of having some income while waiting for the full development of the project eliminated one of her biggest worries. "And the other babies? Joshua will grow up here with Ethan." "Yes," answered Jennifer with tears in her eyes. "They'll grow up like brothers in a community that cares for them." "And Benjamin and Emily will get a proper education," added Margaret. "They'll have more than a proper education," said Dr. Morrison. "They'll have an exemplary education in a community that values learning, sustainability, and social responsibility." As the sun set over the rocky landscape, Sarah sat at the entrance of the cave holding Ethan. The other families were organizing dinner, and there was a sound of happy conversations and children's laughter. For a moment, she closed her eyes and tried to imagine David there with them, seeing their plans becoming reality. She felt a deep peace, as if she was finally fulfilling something he had started. "Daddy," she whispered to Ethan, "you would love this place. Not as it was when I arrived, but as it will become." Ethan babbled something incomprehensible and smiled, as if he understood the importance of the moment. "Sarah," William approached, "can I ask a personal question?" "Of course." "Are you afraid? Of all this responsibility, of all these plans?" Sarah thought carefully before answering. "I am, but it's a different kind of fear than what I felt before." "How so?" "Before I was afraid I couldn't take care of Ethan alone, that I couldn't pay the debts, that I had no purpose in life. Now I'm afraid I won't live up to the opportunity I've been given." "And which kind of fear do you prefer?" Sarah smiled. "Definitely the second one. It's a fear that makes me want to be better, not a fear that paralyzes me." William nodded understandingly. "Jennifer and I talked about this today. We're afraid too, but it's a hopeful fear." "Hopeful fear is a good description," agreed Sarah. That night, for the first time since she had arrived at the property, Sarah slept deeply and without anxiety. Ethan slept peacefully beside her, and the gentle sounds of running water and the other families sleeping created a symphony of peace. Over the next few days, Dr. Morrison returned several times to finalize documents and begin preparations for the initial improvements. Sarah learned about permits, contracts, sustainability, and community management. "It's a lot to take in," she said one morning, after a particularly complex session on environmental regulations. "David felt the same way at first," replied Dr. Morrison, "but you're learning quickly, and more importantly, you're making decisions based on solid values." "What values?" "Responsibility, sustainability, and care for people. These are the foundations of any successful project." A week after the confrontation with the fake Dr. Henderson, Sarah received an unexpected visit. A young lawyer appeared at the property, but this time his approach was completely different. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Dr. Anderson, legal representative for Crystal Springs. I'd like to discuss a partnership proposal." "Partnership?" Sarah was immediately suspicious. "Yes, we understand you're developing a sustainable project, and we'd like to propose a mutually beneficial collaboration." Dr. Morrison, who was present, examined the documents Dr. Anderson presented. "This appears to be a legitimate proposal," he said after a few minutes. "They want to purchase distribution rights for the spring water, but without affecting the aquifer system or the development project." "And what would the benefit be for us?" Guaranteed income of $500,000 a year, plus a percentage of the profits, plus investment in infrastructure for the community. Sarah was astonished. $500,000 a year was more money than she had ever imagined seeing in her entire life. And the obligations? Dr. Anderson explained that the company only wanted bottling rights for the water, leaving the property and community development completely under Sarah's control. "This is a very different offer from the previous ones," observed Dr. Morrison. "This company seems to understand that sustainable development can be more profitable than predatory exploitation." "Can I think about it?" asked Sarah. "Of course, there's no time pressure. Our company prefers well-planned partnerships to rushed agreements." After Dr. Anderson left, Sarah discussed the proposal with all the families. $500,000 a year, whispered Jennifer. "That's a fortune." "Yes, but the question is, does this change our plans?" said Sarah. "How would it change?" asked William. "With that guaranteed income, we could accelerate the project development a lot. School, clinic, workshops, everything could be up and running in less than a year." "And would that be good or bad?" asked Margaret. Sarah thought carefully. "I think it would be good, as long as we don't lose control of what we're creating here." "And we wouldn't," assured Dr. Morrison. "Under the proposed contract, you would maintain total control over all decisions related to the community's development. So it's just extra income to do what we already wanted to do, only faster?" asked Jennifer. "Exactly." "In that case," said William, "I think David would be happy. He wanted to protect this place and help people. This partnership would allow us to do both things much better." Sarah looked around the group, seeing agreement on everyone's faces. "Then let's accept the proposal, but on the condition that Dr. Morrison reviews all the legal details to ensure we keep total control over our community." "Done," said Dr. Morrison. "I'll negotiate the final details this week." A month later, Sarah was at the entrance of the same cave where she had spent her first night on the land, but looking at a completely different scene. Workers were installing solar panels, others were building the first permanent housing structures, and trucks were bringing materials for the school that would open in 3 months. Ethan, now almost a year old, was crawling across the floor of the cavern that had been transformed into a temporary daycare where the children stayed while the adults worked on developing the project. "Mrs. Mitchell," Emily ran up to her. "Teacher Margaret said our new school is going to have a library." "It really is," confirmed Sarah, "and a science lab, and an art workshop, and even a small farm where you'll learn about sustainable agriculture." Benjamin appeared right behind his sister. "And will your William teach woodworking?" "He will. In fact, he's already training some local youth. The carpentry workshop will be one of the first to be fully operational." Jennifer approached, carrying Joshua, who was now walking timidly. "Sarah, a letter arrived for you from the bank. I think it's about the first payments from the water company." Sarah opened the envelope and smiled. The first deposit from the partnership had been made, $500,000 that would allow the community's development to accelerate even further. "Jennifer, do you still want to do the nursing training?" "Very much." "Doctor, Morrison has already arranged a course in the city, and I can go twice a week while the clinic is being built." "Great. And you, William? How are the plans for the woodshop?" William approached, his hands still dirty from working on the construction. "Better than expected. We already have orders from 3 neighboring towns for handmade furniture, and 2 local young people want to learn the trade." "And our school?" asked Sarah, addressing Margaret. "The teaching materials arrived yesterday, and we have 5 local families who want to enroll their children. It will be small at first, but with great growth potential." Sarah looked around at the constant activity and felt a deep satisfaction. In just 2 months, the arid and seemingly worthless land had transformed into the center of a thriving community. "You know what impresses me the most?" she said to Dr. Morrison, who had arrived to supervise the progress. "What?" "How the people from the area have started to get involved naturally. We're not just creating an isolated community, we're improving the entire area." "That is the true power of sustainable development," replied Dr. Morrison. "When done right, it benefits everyone around, not just the direct owners." That afternoon, Sarah received an unexpected visitor, a middle-aged woman in simple but clean clothes, introduced herself at the entrance to the property. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Mrs. Dorothy from the neighboring town. I heard you're hiring people to work at the new clinic." "Yes, we are," confirmed Sarah. "What kind of experience do you have?" "I worked as a nursing assistant for 15 years before I retired. When I heard you were creating a community clinic, I thought I might be able to help." Sarah smiled. "Mrs. Dorothy, we would love to talk with you. Our head nurse is still in training, but we need experienced people to help with the planning." "Head nurse, Mrs.?" Dorothy seemed surprised. "Jennifer." Sarah pointed to the young woman who was organizing educational toys with the children. "She is getting formal training, but she has a lot of practical experience caring for people." "It's so good to see young people getting real opportunities," said Mrs. Dorothy with approval. During the following months, Sarah noticed that the community was growing organically. People from the area began to get involved naturally, whether as employees, suppliers, or simply as neighbors interested in participating in community activities. Margaret's school also became a center for evening activities, offering literacy classes for adults and workshops on sustainability. William's workshop was training a second generation of carpenters. Jennifer's clinic was now serving not just the immediate community, but families from neighboring towns as well. "Sarah," said Dr. Morrison during one of his regular visits, "have you noticed this project has become a regional model? How so?" "Other communities are asking for consulting on how to replicate what you've created here. There's government interest in using this place as an example for other sustainable development projects." "Is that good or bad?" "It depends on how you handle it. It could be an opportunity to influence positive development on a much larger scale." Sarah thought about the implications. When she had first arrived on that land, she had only wanted to solve her immediate financial problems. Now she was at the center of something that could influence regional development. "What do you recommend?" "That you keep your focus on the local community, but consider sharing knowledge and experience with other similar projects." "Like a kind of training center for sustainable development?" "Exactly. You have a unique combination: well-managed natural resources, a functional community, and committed leadership." That evening, Sarah discussed the possibility of expanding their mission with the other families. "How would you all feel about the idea of other people coming here to learn about what we're doing?" she asked. "As long as it doesn't change what we've already built," said William. "I think it would be good. Other people deserve to have what we have." "And it could create more local jobs," added Jennifer. "If people come to learn, they'll need lodging, food, transportation." "And more students for our school," said Margaret excitedly. "We could offer special programs on sustainable education." Sarah smiled. "So is everyone in agreement? Shall we become a center of excellence in sustainable community development?" "Yes," they all said in unison. 6 months later, Sarah was standing in the community's new conference room, presenting the project's results to a group of government delegates, social entrepreneurs, and community leaders from across the country. "What began as a problematic inheritance," she said, "has become a demonstration that economic development and social responsibility can work together to create something better for everyone." In the audience, she could see Jennifer, now formally certified as a nurse and running a clinic that served 5 counties. William was seated next to 2 of his apprentices who had opened their own workshops in neighboring towns. Margaret was with a delegation of educators interested in replicating the teaching methods she had developed. "But most importantly," Sarah continued, "we've learned that sustainable development isn't just about preserving natural resources. It's about preserving and strengthening human communities." Ethan, now walking and speaking simple words, was playing quietly in a special area of the conference room alongside Joshua and other children from the expanded community. "When my husband bought this land," Sarah said, "he was investing in a vision for the future that even I didn't understand at the time. Now I see he wasn't just protecting natural resources. He was creating the possibility for multiple families to build meaningful lives together." After the presentation, one of the delegates approached Sarah. "Mrs. Mitchell, there is interest from the federal government in designating this community as a national pilot project. This would bring a lot of additional funding, but also a lot of public scrutiny," Sarah thought carefully. "What would the impact be on the community's autonomy?" You would retain local control, but you would have to follow federal guidelines and allow regular monitoring. May I discuss it with the community and get back to you in a week? Of course. But know that this opportunity could allow you to influence national public policy on sustainable development. That evening, Sarah gathered all the original families to discuss the federal proposal. "What do you think?" she asked. "Are you comfortable with our community becoming a national example?" "It's a little scary," admitted Jennifer, "but if it can help other people create what we've created, maybe it's worth it." "And you, William and Margaret?" "I think David would be proud," said Margaret. "He wanted this place to make a difference in people's lives. If it can make a difference in the lives of people across the country." "Then we do it," said William, "but on the condition that we never lose our identity as a chosen family." Sarah agreed. "Our priority will always be our local community. Any national influence has to be secondary to that." A year later, Sarah was in the same cave where she had spent her first night on the property, but now transformed into a community museum that told the story of the region's sustainable development. Ethan, now speaking in full sentences, was explaining to a group of visiting children how plants purify the water in the natural spring. Joshua was at his side, translating the more complex explanations into language that younger children could understand. "Mrs. Mitchell," Emily approached, now 11 years old and actively participating in the community's educational programs, "a letter arrived for you from the Federal University." Sarah opened the letter and smiled. It was an invitation to become a visiting professor in a graduate program on sustainable community development. "Professor," Benjamin read over her shoulder, "you're going to teach at the university?" "Perhaps," replied Sarah, "but only if I can do it without leaving here permanently." "Why would you leave?" asked Emily. "This is your home." Sarah looked around the transformed cave, heard the sounds of the thriving community outside, and saw the children who had become her chosen family. "You're right," she said. "This is my home, and family doesn't abandon family." Jennifer appeared at the cave entrance, carrying a medical file and smiling broadly. "Sarah, you need to see the clinic's numbers from last quarter. We served over 1,000 people from 15 different counties. And the woodworking workshop trained 12 new artisans," added William, who arrived right behind her. "2 of them are going to open their own businesses in other regions. And our school," said Margaret with pride, "was ranked the best rural school in the state in educational assessments." Sarah hugged each of them, feeling a deep gratitude for everything they had built together. "You know what makes me happiest?" she said. "What?" they all asked. "That when Ethan and Joshua grow up, they'll grow up in a community where they know they can make a positive difference in the world. And when Emily and Benjamin finish their studies, they'll have real examples that meaningful work and a meaningful life are possible." That afternoon, Sarah wrote a letter to David, something she had begun to do regularly since the community was established. "Dear David, today marks 2 years since I discovered your legacy. Not just the land and the natural resources, but the vision that economic development and social responsibility can work together." Ethan is speaking Portuguese and English, learning about sustainability, before even learning to read formally. He will grow up knowing that meaningful work is possible and necessary. The families you helped have become leaders in a community that now serves as a model for national sustainable development. William has a workshop that trains artisans from across the state. Jennifer runs a clinic that is a regional reference. Margaret developed teaching methods that are now being studied by universities. But more important than any professional success, we became a real family, a family that chooses to care for each other and work together for something greater than our individual interests. I know you would be proud, not just of what we managed to build, but of how we managed to build it, with respect for the land, for the people, and for the future. Thank you for leaving me a legacy that wasn't just about money, but about purpose. I love you always, Sarah. After writing the letter, Sarah placed it with all the others in a special box she kept in her bedroom. Ethan had already learned that those letters were his mum's way of talking to Dad, and he respected the ritual. That evening, the whole community gathered for the weekly community dinner, a tradition they had established since the first few months. The long table accommodated not only the original families, but also Mrs. Dorothy, 2 apprentice carpenters in training, a teaching assistant Margaret had hired, and a family of economic refugees who had arrived the previous week. "Before we eat," said Sarah, standing up, "I'd like to propose a toast." Everyone raised their glasses of juice from the local fruit they had started cultivating. A toast to David, who planted the seed of this community. A toast to all of us, who nurtured this seed until it blossomed. And a toast to the future, which we will build together with responsibility and love. "Cheers," everyone said in unison, including Ethan, who still pronounced the word in a funny way. As the meal continued with lively conversations about plans for the next harvest, building a cultural center, and the possibility of an exchange program with international sustainable communities, Sarah looked around the table and felt a deep peace. Her journey had begun with despair, debt, and land that seemed worthless. Now she was surrounded by a chosen family in a thriving community with a future full of positive possibilities. "Mom," Ethan tugged her shirt, "can I play with Joshua after dinner?" "Of course, sweetheart, but don't go too far from the house." "We'll watch them," offered Emily, who had naturally become a big sister to the younger boys. "And I'll tell bedtime stories," added Benjamin. Sarah smiled, seeing how the children had naturally created a healthy family dynamic. Ethan would never feel the lack of siblings or cousins because he had grown up in a community where all the children looked out for each other. "Jennifer," she said, "how are you feeling about the possibility of expanding the clinic to include mental health services?" "Excited," replied Jennifer. "Dr. Morrison brought a psychologist last week who is interested in developing a community wellness program here. And you, William, are you comfortable with the idea of turning your workshop into a formal technical school?" "Very comfortable. In fact, I already have a waiting list of young people who want to learn sustainable carpentry. It would be good to be able to offer formal certification." "And, Margaret, would you be willing to coordinate an adult education program in addition to the regular school?" Margaret smiled broadly. "I'd be very willing. There are many people in the region who never had the opportunity to complete basic education. Our school could operate in different shifts to accommodate different ages." Sarah absorbed all these possibilities, realizing the community had developed a natural dynamic of responsible growth and expansion. "So, are we all in agreement?" she asked. "We'll continue expanding, but always keeping our values and our identity as a chosen family." "Yes," said William, "as long as we never forget that growth should serve people, not the other way around." "And as long as we always have time for dinners like this," added Jennifer, gesturing to the table full of happy conversation. "And as long as Ethan and Joshua and the other children always have a safe home here," said Margaret. Sarah agreed to all the conditions. "Then we keep growing, together, carefully, and with purpose." After dinner, Sarah walked to the natural spring, now incorporated into a beautiful water garden that served both for environmental preservation and education about ecosystems. The moon reflected in the clear water, and she could hear the soft sounds of the community settling in for the night. Ethan ran up to her, followed by Joshua and supervised by the older children. "Mommy, tell the daddy story," asked Ethan, as he did many nights. Sarah sat on a smooth stone by the spring and pulled Ethan onto her lap. Joshua snuggled against Jennifer, who had come closer. Emily and Benjamin sat on the ground, ready to listen. "Your daddy was a very wise man," Sarah began. "He knew that the best things in life aren't the things you get by yourself, but the things you build with people you love." "Like our family?" asked Ethan. "Exactly like our family. Your daddy bought this land not because he wanted to get rich, but because he wanted to create a place where good people could have a good life." "And did he?" asked Joshua, who also liked the stories about Ethan's father. "He did. Look around you. This community, this family, this life we have, all of it started because your daddy believed that good people deserve chances to be happy." "And was he happy?" asked Emily. Sarah thought about the question carefully. "I think he would be very happy if he could see what we've built here, especially if he could see how you've all grown up in a family that loves and cares for each other." "Will we always be family?" asked Benjamin. "Always," confirmed Sarah. Even when you grow up and maybe have your own family somewhere else, this will always be your home, and we will always be your family." "And will Ethan always be my best friend?" asked Joshua. "Forever," said Ethan solemnly, as if making an important promise. Sarah hugged the boys and smiled at the older children. "Now let's all get to bed. Tomorrow we have a lot of work to do building our future together." As the children were led to their beds in the permanent homes that now dotted the property, Sarah stayed a few more minutes by the spring, reflecting on everything that had happened. 2 years before, she had arrived there with a baby, a suitcase, and desperation. Now she was surrounded by family, purpose, and hope. The transformation had been complete, but also gradual and organic. "David," she whispered to the starry night, "thank you for giving me so much more than land. Thank you for giving me the chance to discover who I really can be when I have people to love and protect." A gentle breeze moved the leaves of the trees they had planted around the spring, and Sarah chose to interpret it as a loving reply. Walking back to the house, she passed the lit school where Margaret was preparing lessons for the next day, the workshop where William had left ongoing furniture projects, and the clinic where a nightlight indicated Jennifer was on call for emergencies. Her own house, built modestly but with every necessary comfort, was quiet. Ethan was fast asleep in his room, surrounded by toys made by William and books chosen by Margaret. Sarah got ready for bed, thinking of the plans for the next day: a meeting with potential solar energy investors, a discussion about the community composting program, and planning for the community's 2-year anniversary party the following month. But more important than any specific project, she went to sleep knowing she had found her place in the world, not just a place to live, but a purpose for existing. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this inspiring story about Sarah and her journey of discovery. Do you believe sustainable communities like the one she created are possible in the real world? Leave your opinion in the comments. Share your own experiences about chosen family and community development. Don't forget to leave your like if the story touched your heart, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories about overcoming adversity, community, and hope. Your participation helps us immensely to continue bringing content that inspires and moves you.